I promised this yesterday, but here we go. What if I told you that Russia cannot afford to continue the war in Ukraine? They also cannot afford to stop the war in Ukraine. Now we're going to go to why they can't afford to continue. I'm going to start there. The military budget in U.S. dollars for Russia is between 149 and 186 billion dollars a year at this point. They can't necessarily get a hardcore number on that one because obviously Putin keeps everything as much of a secret as possible these days, and these numbers aren't necessarily all for public consumption. As you might guess, the official budget is the lower end of that range, and the extreme estimate is the higher end of that range. But it's still, 149 to 186 billion dollars per year. Now, this is contributing to a deficit, as it does in most countries. Russia, however, has what's called a rainy day fund or the National Wealth Fund. As of this filming, that number is somewhere right around 63 billion American dollars. Keep in mind that the Russian ruble trades with the US dollar rate of about 120 to 1 at this point. So you're talking about pretty big, much bigger numbers in their view. But nonetheless, $63 billion when the military budget is triple that. The military budget has in turn tripled over the past 3 to 4 years since the Ukraine invasion began. Why is the military budget so expensive? Well, it's not weapons, it's really manpower. And given that the Russian army has incurred 1.2 million casualties since this whole special military operation began in 2022, we are sitting here right now with a populace that's very reluctant to volunteer to go to war. Obviously, at those rates of casualties, would you? But they have to keep it. They have to keep them as quote unquote volunteers. There have been limited conscriptions, but these conscriptions have been, as I said, they're limited in scope. And so he's losing men at the rate of 1,200 per day. And casualties are either fatalities or men being injured to the level where they can't return to the battlefield, or more likely than not, they're disabled for life. This is part of the expenditures. So taking care of the wounded is part of that increasing expenditure. The recruitment bonuses are part of the increasing expenditure as well. Vladimir Putin is offering the Russian equivalent of about $50,000 in signing bonuses to new contract soldiers. Now, they're losing about 1,200 per day, but they're only recruiting about 600 per day. So they're losing people faster than they can replace them. And so these sky-high bonuses are part of that equation. Military salaries are somewhere around the equivalent of $2,000 per month in US dollars. Both figures are substantially multiple times over the national average. And most of these recruits are coming, as I said in an earlier video, Russia has 89 subnational jurisdictions or provinces. Over 90% of these recruits are coming from the poorest or the bottom end 70 of these municipalities. They're not coming from Moscow. They're not coming from St. Petersburg. They're not coming from the wealthier sons of the nation. They're coming from ethnic minorities in either the Russian Far East or the Urals, which is the mountain range in the center of the country that splits Europe to the west and Asia to the east. So Siberia bears a lot of the brunt of this. The Russian Far East, which includes cities like Vladivostok and Yakutsk. These are territories with minority ethnicity. Chukotka on the far eastern end, they don't have a lot of people to draw, but that is the easternmost territory in Russia. So far east that part of it is actually in the west. It does cross the 180-degree meridian, and therefore some of it's in the Western Hemisphere. But the population of Chukotka is only about 49,000. So not pulling many from there. However, next to it to the west is the Sakha Republic, Yakutsk, and the Yakut people. Yakutsk as a city has 300,000+ residents. The Sakha Republic as a territory has 1 million. But in these areas, in the Urals, and also areas like the Caucasus region, so places like Ossetia, places like Chechnya, which has its own contentious history with Vladimir Putin. These recruits are coming out of these places. However, these dollar amounts in these areas, death benefits being also similar to the signing bonus, about $50,000. This is life-changing money for people in these areas. It wouldn't matter so much to somebody in St. Petersburg or Moscow, but to somebody in Chechnya, South Ossetia, and Novosibirsk. In these provinces and places, this is life-changing money. And this gets to the other flip side of the equation, why he cannot afford to stop the war. You see, this is resulting in an exponential amount of money being sent to these poor ethnic minority provinces. This is how he keeps his tenuous hold on power. You stop the war and you stop the payments, these provinces and territories go into open revolt. So for that reason, he can't afford to stop the war. Vladivostok goes to war with Putin, and the Chinese sweep in. Vladivostok is a part of what used to be called Outer Manchuria. It is now a territory called Primorsky Krai. So it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation for Vladimir Putin. He stops the war. The financial spigot to these territories stops, and they openly revolt and possibly starts the breakup of the Russian Federation in a much more violent fashion than the breakup of the Soviet Union, which at least had a peaceful, relatively speaking, transition where the territories became naturally independent and declared independence, and it came as a natural matter of events. This breakup would not be as peaceful at all. It would result in militias in these territories being formed. Some of them already have militias to physically fight the Russian territory and Putin for their freedom, which would leave his hold on power limited to areas like, well, Moscow and St. Petersburg. And much of what is presently about the western 20% of the country. And if he continues the war, of course, the economy will eventually crash. For proof of this, all you gotta do is see how much money Russia is printing right now. This created hyperinflation in Zimbabwe in the 90s, hyperinflation in Venezuela in the 2012 20s and early and late 2010s. If you print money that is unbacked, the value of that money naturally will decline. Now you're wondering how the United States pulls it off? Well, the United States is the de facto world currency. The world has a tremendous faith in the US dollar. The US economy produces more than anybody else in the world by a long shot. And so this particular production level allows the US to print money nonstop. Russia doesn't have that luxury. Russia is disconnected from the world economy because of sanctions from the West and from other nations. And the countries that don't sanction them, such as China and India, buy their oil, which used to be their economic lifeblood. They buy their oil at strictly heavily discounted rates. You know, the European price for Brent crude oil right now is a little over $100 a barrel. In the United States, West Texas Intermediate goes for about $70+ a barrel. The increase in the situations in Iran have not affected us as much as it has Europe because, well, simply put, the United States produces a lot more. But Russia, with their production, they're getting $50 a barrel right now from China and India, who are driving a very hard bargain because they can't sell to anybody else. They're banned from selling to other countries. Now, in turn, they do have a way around those sanctions. It's called the shadow fleet. And the shadow fleet are oil-carrying tankers that sail with flags from other countries, such as China, such as India, or even certain Middle Eastern oil producers. It's a deception game. They sell their oil under the shadow fleet and they ship it to other countries, maybe like South America or Africa in particular, ones that are not necessarily part of the sanctioning framework at this point. But if he continues this war, these sanctions will continue, and these countries will continue to force Putin to sell for well below world market rates, which again affects the budget, which again affects his ability to conduct this war. The budget is he's scraping the bottom of the barrel of the National Wealth Fund to fund this war. At the present burn rate on the National Wealth Fund, it's going to run out of money either late this year or early 2027. He'll be out of cash with no way and no connection to the global financial markets to raise that money. Countries like the United States can freely borrow from other countries by selling bonds elsewhere. Russia cannot do this. As long as the war continues, they're cut off from the financial global markets. SWIFT is the name of the international money transferring system. They're banned from using that system. I've worked in financial services before, and I know what SWIFT is. You can send, using the SWIFT system, a financier in the United States can send euros to somebody in not Great Britain. They can send British pounds to somebody in Great Britain, but they can send euros to a German business partner. The SWIFT system actually works quite beautifully, but they're not allowed to participate in this. As long as Russia continues to conduct this illegal war, they'll continue to be banned from it, and they cannot raise funds from other countries or sell bonds. So they have to print the money. And of course, as we all know what happened in Zimbabwe, where billion-dollar notes couldn't even buy you a loaf of bread. This is the path that Russia is headed down. But on the other hand, if they don't continue this war, the monetary spigot to the outlying regions that they continue to keep under their thumb would revolt. And by printing all this money, those numbers will also go up. as far as how many rubles they're sending to military conscripts, their families upon death. So there it is. Russia cannot afford to continue the war in Ukraine. They cannot afford to stop the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is a damned if you do and damned if you don't scenario. So that's my spiel for today. I'm going to be back. I'm probably going to be sticking to the geopolitical realm for a while. But I'll think of something else. But let me know if you know of anything different on this one in the comments. Please hit the subscribe button. I'm just going to continue on this trail for a while. Simply because, well, it predominates the news these days. There are a lot of independent sources out there that are available here on YouTube that the mainstream media won't cover. This being one of them. And Vladimir Putin certainly doesn't allow it in his own country. He black out his own internet to keep this information from spreading. Even in the capital of Moscow, even the area around the Kremlin didn't have wireless or Wi-Fi internet access. Hasn't had it for weeks. So hit the like button if you want me to keep going, and subscribe if you want me to keep going on this path. I most certainly would appreciate it. So thank you for everything. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace out, homies.